name's Miss Dani from the Pleasant Hills Public Library, and I'm so excited to be here with you today for another virtual fairy tale STEAM. So STEAM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Mathematics. And our STEAM experiment today will have you thinking about all of those subject areas as they relate to the tale of Cinderella. The version of Cinderella that you're probably most familiar with can be traced back to the French version published by Charles Perrault in 1697. That version includes a fairy godmother, mice turned into coachmen, and a pumpkin turned into a golden coach. But did you know that the story of Cinderella is much, much, much older than that? The original versions of Cinderella can be found in ancient Greek and ancient Chinese transcripts from 6 BC and even earlier. That's thousands and thousands of years ago. Now, those versions are pretty different from the English version we know and love today, but they're still really awesome. Today, we're going to read one retelling of the ancient version and then one retelling of the French version. We're going to start today with this story, a take on the ancient version of Cinderella. This is the Egyptian Cinderella, written by Shirley Climo and illustrated by Ruth Heller. Long ago, in the land of Egypt, where the green Nile River widens to meet the blue sea, there lived a maiden called Rhodopis. When she was still a small child, Rhodopis had been stolen by pirates. She was snatched from her home in Greece, taken across the sea to Egypt, and there sold as a slave. Like the Egyptian servant girls, Rhodopis went to the water's edge each day to wash clothes or to gather the reeds that grew along the riverbank. But Rhodopis looked different from the Egyptian girls. Their eyes were brown and hers were green. Their hair hung straight to their shoulders, while the breeze blew hers into tangles. Their skin glowed like copper, but her pale skin burned red beneath the skin. And that was how she got her name, for Rhodopis meant rosy-cheeked in Greek. "Oh, Rosy Rhodopis," scoffed the servant girls, hissing her name between their teeth. Rhodopis pretended not to hear, but she blushed rosier than ever. Although her master was kind, he was old and liked to doze beneath a fig tree. He seldom heard the servant girls tease Rhodopis, and he never saw them ordering her about. "Hurry, Rhodopis," they'd shout at her. "The geese are in the garden eating up the onions. Mend my robe. I'm hungry, Rhodopis. Bake the bread." Rhodopis always hurried to do their bidding, for the Egyptian girls were household servants, and she was only a slave. Rhodopis found friends among the animals instead. Birds ate crumbs from her hands. She coaxed a monkey to sit upon her shoulder and charmed a hippopotamus with her songs. It would raise its huge head from the muddy water and prick its small ears to listen. Sometimes, when her chores were done and the day had cooled, Rhodopis would dance for her animal companions. She twirled so lightly that her tiny bare feet scarcely touched the ground. One evening, her master awakened to see her dance. "No goddess is more nimble," he called out. "Such a gift deserves reward." He tugged his chin whiskers, thinking, and then declared, "You shall go barefoot no longer." Her master ordered a pair of dainty slippers made especially for Rhodopis. The soles were of real leather, and the toes were gilded with rose-red gold. Now, when Rhodopis danced, her feet sparkled like fireflies. The rose-red slippers set Rhodopis more apart than ever. The Egyptian servant girls were jealous, for they wore clumsy sandals woven from papyrus. Out of spite, they found new tasks for her to do, keeping Rhodopis so busy that she was too tired to dance at night. One evening, Kipa, who was chief among the servant girls, announced, "Tomorrow we will sail for Memphis to see the Pharaoh. His Majesty is going to hold court for all his subjects." "There will be musicians and dancing," said another servant girl, eyeing those rose-red slippers. "There will be feasting," added a third. "Oh, poor Rhodopis, you must stay behind," Kipa jeered. "You have linen to wash and grain to grind and the garden to weed." The next morning, just as Ra the sun was climbing into the sky, Rhodopis followed the servant girls to the riverbank. Kipa wore a necklace of blue beads. Bracelets jingled on the wrist of the second. The third had tied a many-colored sash around her waist. Although Rhodopis wore a plain tunic, on her feet were the rose-red slippers. Perhaps they will let me come along to see the pharaoh after all, she thought. But the 3 servant girls pulled their raft around the bend in the river without giving Rhodopis a backward glance. Rhodopis sighed and turned to the basket piled high with dirty clothes. Wash the linen, weed the garden, grind the grain. She slapped the wooden paddle against the cloth in time to her song. The hippopotamus, tired of so dull a tune, pushed out of the reeds and splashed into the river. Shame, cried Rhodopis, shaking her paddle. You splattered mud on my beautiful slippers. She polished the shoes on the hem of her tunic until the rosy gold glittered in the sun, and then she carefully put them on the bank behind her. Wash the linen, weed the garden, Rhodopis began again, when suddenly a shadow fell on the water. Rhodopis jumped up. A great falcon, the symbol of the god Horus, circled in the sky with wings spread so wide that they blotted out the sun. Oh, greetings to you, proud Horus, Rhodopis murmured. She bowed her head and felt a rush of air on the back of her neck. When Rhodopis dared to lift her eyes, she saw the falcon soar away. Dangling from his talons was one of her beautiful slippers. Oh, stop, she pleaded. Come back. But the bird did not heed her. He flew towards the sun until he was no more than a dark speck against the gold. Rhodopis bit her tongue. One shoe was worse than none at all. Now she'd have to dance like a stork, hopping about on one foot, and even the monkey would laugh. Rhodopis tucked the slipper into her tunic and returned to her laundry, salting the river with her tears. After Rhodopis had lost sight of the falcon, the mighty bird followed the course of the Nile to the city of Memphis, to the square where the pharaoh was holding court. Then the falcon watched and waited. The pharaoh's name was Amisis. On his head he wore the red and white crown of the 2 Egypts. The double crown was heavy and it pinched his ears. He preferred driving his chariot fast as the wind to sitting on a throne. Amasis yawned. The very moment the falcon dropped the rose-red slipper into his lap. The slipper was so bright that Amisis thought it was a scrap of the sun. Then he saw the falcon wheeling overhead. "The god Horus sends me a sign," exclaimed the pharaoh. He picked up the rose-red slipper. "Every maiden in Egypt must try this shoe. She whose foot it fits shall be my queen. That is the will of the gods." Amasis dismissed the court, called for his chariot, and began his search at once. When the Egyptian servant girls arrived in Memphis, they found the throne empty and the streets deserted. They were so angry on their return that even seeing Rhodopis without her rose-red slipper did not please them. "Slaves are better off barefoot," snapped Kipa. The pharaoh journeyed to distant cities. He tracked the desert where pyramids tower over the sand, and he climbed the steep cliffs where falcons nest. The rose-red slipper was always in his hand. Wherever he went, women and girls, rich or poor, flocked to try on the slipper, but none could fit into such a small shoe. The longer Amisis searched, the more determined he became to marry the maiden who had lost this tiny slipper. He summoned his royal barge and vowed to visit every landing along the Nile. The barge was hung with sails of silk. Trumpets blared and oarsmen rowed to the beat of gongs. The din was so dreadful that when the barge rounded the bend in the river, Rhodopis fled in alarm, but the servant girls ran to the water's edge. "Oh, now we'll see the pharaoh," cried Kipa. Amisis held up the rose-red slipper. "Whoever can wear this shoe shall be my queen." The servant girls knew that shoe and knew its owner too, and yet they clapped their hands over their mouths and said nothing. If one of them could wear it. Well, first Keepa, then the others, tried to put on the slipper. Each crammed her foot and curled her toes and squeezed until tears ran down her cheeks, but still her heel hung over. "Enough," said Amisus wearily. He would have set sail again had he not chanced to see Rhodopis peering through the rushes. He was here over there. "Come," he commanded. "You must try this rose-red slipper." The servant girls gawked open-mouthed as the pharaoh kneeled before Rhodopis. He slipped the tiny shoe on her foot with ease. Then Rhodopis pulled its mate from the folds of her tunic. "Behold," cried Amisus, "in all this land there is none so fit to be queen." But Rhodopis is a slave," protested one of the servant girls. Keepa sniffed. "She's not even Egyptian." "She is the most Egyptian of all," the pharaoh declared, "for her eyes are as green as the Nile, her hair as feathery as papyrus, and her skin the pink of a lotus flower." The pharaoh led Rhodopis to the royal barge, and with every step her rose-red slippers winked and sparkled in the sun. So that story is part fable and part fact. So there was a Greek girl stolen by pirates and sold into slavery in Egypt by the name of Rhodopis, and she did, in fact, marry the pharaoh Amisus to become queen. Now, whether or not she had rose-red slippers, nobody knows for sure. Next, we're going to read a story that's based off of the French version, and this one might be a little bit more familiar to you. This is Cinderella, written and illustrated by Barbara McClintock, and read today with permission of Scholastic Press. Once upon a time, a nobleman lived happy with his sweet and gentle-natured wife and young daughter. And when his wife died, he took another, who seemed as sweet and gentle as the first, but no sooner was the wedding over than the new wife revealed herself to be the mean and jealous person she truly was. She couldn't stand the way her new stepdaughter's pleasing demeanor made her own daughters look silly and selfish, and that is why she gave her stepdaughter only rags to wear and made her do all the worst chores around the house. The poor girl swept all the floors, washed and dried and pressed the laundry, scrubbed the stairs, and cleaned and scoured every dish, pot, and pan. At night, she slept on a thin mattress in the dingy attic, while her stepsisters had a lavish bedroom and all the luxuries they wanted. Her stepmother ruled her father with an iron fist, and the poor girl knew he would only scold her if she complained. So she suffered in patient silence. After a long day, when her chores were done, the girl sat by the cinders near the fireplace to keep warm, which is why she was called Cinderella. But the older stepsister, who was the meaner of the two, called her Cinder Bottom. Despite everything, Cinderella in her rags was still 1,000 times more beautiful and dear than her spoiled stepsisters. One evening, the girls were invited to a grand ball that was being given by the king's son. The stepsisters were all aflutter about what to wear and how to arrange their hair. "Oh, and what will you wear, Cinderella?" they teased. Cinderella sighed. "I'm not going," she said, examining her tattered clothing, but she wished to go with all her heart. The stepsisters asked Cinderella to help them dress and put up their hair because she could make whatever she arranged look beautiful, and they couldn't resist taunting her. "Can you imagine Cinder Bottom at the ball?" asked the elder. "They'd have to follow her around with a dustpan while holding their noses," said the younger one, and both squealed with laughter. Cinderella resisted the urge to yank their hair. Instead, she patiently made them look as pleasing as possible. The time came to go to the ball. Cinderella watched as her stepsisters entered their carriage and drove away, and once they were out of sight, she began to cry. A kind stranger appeared and asked what the matter was. I wish," Cinderella was crying too hard to talk. But this kindly woman, who was really her fairy godmother, said, "I know. You wish to go to the ball." "Oh, yes," said Cinderella. "Well, then," said the godmother, "let's get busy. We'll start with this pumpkin. Now, bring me 4 mice, a rat, and 4 lizards." This did seem a bit odd to Cinderella, but she found 4 mice and a rat in a trap and 4 lizards behind a garden pot. The godmother raised her arms and said the magic words, "Fumus volumus!" And in a flash, the pumpkin grew into a golden carriage. The 4 mice changed into 4 handsome gray horses. The lizards became 4 livery men dressed in shining emerald green, and the rat turned into a portly coachman with a jaunty mustache. And Cinderella was amazed. "Now, one more thing," said the godmother with a smile. All at once, Cinderella's tattered rags vanished, and the most beautiful dress imaginable appeared in their place. A pair of tiny glass slippers graced her feet. "My dear," her godmother said, "you must be home before midnight, because at the stroke of 12 everything will turn back to what it was. Don't forget." Cinderella thanked her godmother, stepped into her coach, and rode away. When the prince heard that an unknown princess had arrived, he rushed to greet her. He gave Cinderella his arm, and together they walked into the ball. All eyes were on this charming stranger. The ladies studied her so that they could copy her hair and dress the next day. Even the king and queen admired her beauty. The prince asked her to dance. Her astounding grace enchanted everyone, and by the time dinner was served, the prince was so smitten that he couldn't eat a bite. He gave Cinderella a plate of oranges as a gift. She brought them to her stepsisters and served them with kindness. They were dumbstruck that this unknown beauty would pay them any attention at all. Suddenly, Cinderella saw that it was 11:45, and she curtsied and quickly left. When she got home, Cinderella told her godmother all about the ball and how much she wished to go again the next night. And then she heard her stepsisters at the door. "Oh, you were gone so long," she yawned, pretending that she'd been asleep. "Oh, the most beautiful princess came to the ball," said the younger stepsister. "And she gave us oranges," said the elder. "Oh, I'd love to see her," said Cinderella. "Won't one of you lend me an old dress so that I could go tomorrow?" "What a joke!" Both stepsisters laughed. "Lend a dress to a filthy cinder bottom!" Cinderella smiled a secret smile. The next night, the 2 stepsisters entered the ball, followed by Cinderella, who was dressed even more beautifully than she'd been the night before. And the moment she arrived, the prince was at her side. They danced all night, chatting with the ease of old close friends, and the time passed sweetly and so quickly. Suddenly, Cinderella heard the clock strike 12. She ran as fast as a startled deer, and she bounded down the stairs, and 1 glass slipper fell from her foot. Outside the palace stood a pumpkin, and from beneath it 4 mice, 4 lizards, and a rat scurried away. Cinderella's elegant dress turned back to rags. The prince ran after her, but all he found was her little sparkling shoe on the stairs. He held it close for the rest of the night, thinking only of the mysterious princess who had run away with his heart. The next morning, the stepsisters were beside themselves with excitement. The prince had made a proclamation that he would marry the girl who fit the glass slipper. His valet would go to every house to try the slipper on the foot of each young lady in the kingdom. "Oh, just think," the older stepsister said. "What if the slipper fits me?" "Or me?" wondered the younger one. Soon the prince's valet appeared at the door, holding the little glass slipper on a cushion. First, the elder stepsister tried on the slipper, but without success. Then the younger stepsister tried, also with no luck. "May I try?" whispered Cinderella. "You?" sneered the stepsisters. "Oh, what a stupid idea!" But, to everyone's great astonishment, the slipper fit Cinderella's foot perfectly. And when Cinderella pulled the matching slipper from her pocket, the younger stepsister fainted. The prince was overcome with joy, and within a few days a great wedding took place. Cinderella and the prince were married. Her father gave her to the groom with great pride. And Cinderella, in her kindness, forgave her stepmother and found each of her stepsisters a suitable nobleman to wed. They were all terribly sorry about how they had treated her, and everyone lived happily ever after, forever and a day. So as I mentioned earlier, there are many, many, many different versions of Cinderella out there from around the world. I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple different versions that we have here at the Pleasant Hills Public Library that you can request using our curbside pickup. I should note that online holds have opened back up, so you can actually search the catalog now for Cinderella stories from all the different libraries here in Allegheny County and still pick them up here at Pleasant Hills Public Library. To place a curbside order, you can give us a call at 412-655-2424. Send us an email to pleasanthills@einetwork.net or drop a message on this video. All right, let's get started. For any of my friends just learning how to read, this is a very basic version of Cinderella written in an easy reader format. This is Cinderella written by Barry Wade and illustrated by Julie Monks. Our next two may be in board book format, but they're suitable for all ages. This is part of a series, The Once Upon a World. This is Cinderella by Chloe Perkins and illustrated by Sandra Ucara. And it takes the Cinderella story and gives it a Mexican twist. This one is Cinderella Rex, also part of a new board book series, Once Before Time, written by Christy Webster and Holly Haddam. And it imagines Cinderella as a dinosaur. If you're a fan of the Disney version of Cinderella, you'll want to check out these cool books. This one is Cinderella, a Princessography. We also have a beginning chapter, Cinderella and the Lost Tiara. And then lastly, a junior novelization of the live-action version of Cinderella. If you'd like to check out other books based on the French version, I recommend these ones. This is an older version, Cinderella, written and illustrated by Marcia Brown. We have this fun one, Cinderella, written and retold by Barbara Claren and illustrated by James Marshall. This is a fun one that features Cinderella as well as some other princess tales, and it's told in a graphic novel format. This is There's a Princess in the Palace, 5 classic tales retold by Zoe B. Alley with illustrations done by R.W. Alley. This is a silly version of Cinderella done with beautiful illustrations. This is Cinder's A Chicken Cinderella, written and illustrated by Jan Brett. If you'd like to read some more Cinderella stories from around the world, I recommend these titles. This one is Anklet for a Princess, a Cinderella story from India, written by Leela Mitha and adapted by Meredith Bucker, illustrated by Yushan Tang. This lovely picture book won the Caldecott Award. This is Mufara's Beautiful Daughters, an African tale written and illustrated by John Steptoe. Our last version of Cinderella today is A Smoky Mountain Rose, the Appalachian Cinderella, written by Alan Schroeder and illustrated by Brad Sneed. And now it's time for STEAM! So, in the French version, Cinderella's fairy godmother turns a pumpkin into a carriage. Unfortunately, at the stroke of midnight, it turns back into a pumpkin, so Cinderella needs a reliable new mode of transportation. So that's our challenge today. We're going to try to design and build a working carriage for Cinderella. Now, you can request one of our take-home kits. They look like this. And if you don't request one, you can still drop by and pick one up as supplies last. But I should warn you, they go pretty fast. In your kit, you get a plastic container, 2 dowel rods, 4 wheels, 2 rubber bands, a toothpick, a paper that has a Cinderella that you can color and cut out, and a couple other fun goodies. Now, if you can't get one of our kits, that's okay. You can look around your house for what supplies you might have at home that could work. Things that also work as wheels would be bottle caps. You could cut some out of cardboard, lids from different containers, anything really that's round that you can attach a stick to. So if you're working with one of our kits, the first step is going to be to get your dowel rods and attach your wheels. Now on our instruction sheet, we said that you'll probably want to hot glue or just regular glue these wheels on. But when I was experimenting with mine, I realized that they stick pretty good even without glue. So that's up to you. You'll start by adding one big wheel to one of the dowel rods and one little wheel to the other dowel rod. So these are obviously our wheels, and these are going to be our axles. Here's a little tip. When I was experimenting with mine, I noticed that the slits on my plastic container were a little high and the axles kept moving up and down. So something I did to fix it was to use some tape to block off the top part of the hole. Can you see that there? To make it so the axle stayed a little bit better. But you can experiment with yours to determine what works best for you. Next, we're going to want to attach our rubber band to the axle with the big wheel. The easiest way to do this is to take your rubber band and loop it through and pull it tight. You see how I did that, my friends? I'll do it one more time up close to the camera so you can see. Loop it, and then pull it tight. The next step is to put your axles, even the one with the rubber band, through the holes in your container. Might have to pull that rubber band a little bit. Then we're going to add the wheels on the other side. There we go. And then our last step's a little tricky. You're going to take your rubber band and you're going to thread it through one of the holes in the front of your container. See how I did that? This is where your toothpick comes in. You're going to slide your toothpick through that rubber band to hold it in place. Now the toothpick might move around a little bit, so one easy thing to do would be to tape it in place. If you had access to glue, you could also glue it in place. You don't have to do that part. It just helps it from wobbling a little bit, which makes your car move a little faster. All right, so here is my completed car. Now, you can decorate your carriage however you would like. You could draw on it with markers. You could add paint, especially on these wheels. They would take paint very well. You could glue on ribbons or gemstones, whatever you might have at home to make your carriage extra fancy for Cinderella. So now we have our carriage. It's important to test that your axles can move. Got good movement? All right. Now we're going to see if it works. Now, friends, we're going to try to wind our car up to help it move. One way to do that is to hold the rubber band while twisting this axle. It's a little hard to see on camera, so I'll show you before I let go what it looks like. Twist, 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 twist. See how I'm twisting it, friends? You're going to want to continue to twist it as tight as you can get it to go. I will say that this works better on a flat surface than it does on carpet, so try it on a table or tile, whatever you might have at home. All right, fingers crossed it works. You ready? Once you've completed your carriage, we would love to see pictures or videos of your finished product. You can add them as a comment to this video. You can email them to us at pleasanthills@einetwork.net, or you can add them to our special Facebook group, Pleasant Hills Library SRC Imagine Your Story. All right, my friends, I hope you've enjoyed our virtual Fairies Tales theme for this week, and I'll see you next week when we talk all about dragons. Bye!